When Marvel's publisher heard about the idea of Spider-Man, he called it the worst idea he's ever heard. Now, Spider-Man is worth over $26 billion. That's like 5 billion Big Macs. It's a lot of Big Macs. But how did it all start? Why did Spider-Man blow up to be one of the biggest characters in the world? And what happened to Spider-Man's co-creator? To fill you in, we have to head all the way back to 1962. Now, this origin of Spider-Man doesn't start in a lab with a spider bite. It starts in New York City at Marvel Comics. Stan Lee is staring at a fly on his wall. Why? Because his boss, Martin Goodman, wants a new superhero to compete with DC. And as Stan watches this fly walk up the walls, defying gravity like it's nothing, he gets an idea. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a superhero that did that? Walk on walls! That's my Stan Lee impression, I'm so sorry. But he had no idea what to call it. He came up with some ideas like Insect Man. Mosquito Man was somehow worse. Then he landed on Spider-Man. So he rushes into his boss's office with his pitch. Picture this, a teenager who gets superpowers, but here's the twist. He's got acne, girl problems, he can't pay rent, and he fails constantly. Now, Goodman's response is legendary. He looks at Stan and says, people hate spiders, teenagers can't be heroes, they're sidekicks. Superheroes don't have personal problems, they're super. It's in the name. And he ended it with saying, Stan, this is the worst idea I've ever heard. But here's where it gets interesting. Stan believed in his idea so much, he went to an artist to help him design the character. And the artist he chose was a quiet man named Steve Ditko. Steve came up with the web shooters, the costume, the weird way Spider-Man crouches, and even the way he holds his hand when shooting the webs. That was all Ditko. Now, we'll come back to Ditko in a bit because he's very, very important to the story. Now, Stan goes back to his boss and tries to pitch it again with all this wonderful art, and Goodman agrees to publish it because the comic that he was going to be publishing it in was being canceled. It's like letting your kid paint on the wall because you're about to demolish the house. And in August of 1962, Amazing Fantasy 15 hits the newsstands. And the comic became the best-selling Marvel comic, or at least a surprise success. Why did it become such a big success? We'll get into that in a second. But I do just want to mention, you know the famous quote,
"With great power comes great responsibility."
That wasn't the actual quote at first. The actual quote was, with great power, there must also come great responsibility, and the quote wasn't even attributed to Uncle Ben until 1987, 25 years later in Spider-Man vs. Wolverine after the first comic, but I'm getting ahead of myself. After the surprise success, the boss publisher who called Spider-Man the worst idea he's ever heard storms into Stan's office, and he says something like, remember that Spider-Man we both love so much? Let's give him his own series! And that series was called The Amazing Spider-Man. And it took off. There were a few non-believers at the time, but eventually, and specifically by issue 14, basically every comic book reader was hooked. This was evident from a letter to the editor that recalls a fellow fan ragging on the superhero until that issue, and then told Stan, you got me. I tracked down this hater, and he agreed to have a conversation with me on why he disliked Spider-Man at first and what changed his mind. Here he is. Paul Gambaccini, everyone. What specifically made you dislike the early issues of Spider-Man enough to write multiple fan letters?
I think I resented the fact that Spider-Man was always on the side of good, so there was no real drama. And Steve Ditko's art, Spider-Man always looked towards the right side of the panel. It was kind of unimaginative.
And what exactly happened that flipped you into a fan?
Then things got very interesting with the introduction of the villains. As you may remember, there was like a new villain every issue. As a matter of fact, there was one, number 16, which had the great Gambonos, who were named after me.
Wow. Yeah.
I started paying more attention. And
what made you flip? Was it because you were mentioned in it, or was it just did it grow on you at that point?
It just grew on me.
And pretty much everyone else followed suit after that and became true believers. But that was just the comic world. The rest of the world is coming soon. But it started to become clear why Spider-Man resonated so much, as he appeared in Esquire magazine next to Bob Dylan. A college student tells Esquire that Spider-Man is a hero because he is beset by his woes, money problems, and the question of existence. In short, he's one of us. And that was Marvel's new formula. That is what made a successful hero. Superpowers and real problems. And I just want to say how much of a game changer that was, because at the time, all heroes at that point were looked at as like gods and idols. They were perfect, usually rich, alien superheroes from another planet. They were idolized, they were flawless, and this was one of the first heroes who were relatable to the core demographic of teenagers at the time. Now here's where our story gets weird and kind of sad. As Spider-Man explodes in popularity, Stan and Steve stop talking. Why? Well, this is because of something called the Marvel method. Stan would write a paragraph about what the plot of the story is, and then Ditko disappears and comes back with 20 pages of fully illustrated story. The entire plot, the pacing, the action was all from Ditko's brain, and then Stan adds the dialogue, and then there were some meetings here and there between Ditko and Stan, but here's why this was a real big problem. Who owned Spider-Man? Who was the creator? Because all of the taglines said it was Stan. Ditko barely got any recognition for it. Stan's going out and giving interviews, going to parties, and becoming the face of Marvel. And when reporters ask about Spider-Man, they talk to Stan. When fans write letters, Stan answers. Even though Ditko is creating villain after villain, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, Mysterio, Sandman, every iconic visual, every costume design coming from a man nobody knows existed. And by issue 20, they only communicated through the comic pages. He's just dropping off pages and then leaving. And think about that, two men creating one of the most beloved characters on the planet refuse to speak to each other. Then in June 1966, something happens that changes everything. Ditko delivers Amazing Spider-Man number 38, picks up his check, and walks out. He never comes back. There's no farewell issue, no explanation. The man who designed everything you recognize about Spider-Man just vanishes. Some say his big fallout with Lee was because of the Green Goblin's identity. And while Steve and Stan's relationship imploded, Spider-Man keeps growing. In 1967, the cartoon launches with that legendary theme song, and by the 1970s, Spider-Man outsells Superman. There is even a Japanese Spider-Man TV show that accidentally invents the Power Rangers. True story. But then, Marvel makes one of the dumbest business decisions in history. In 1985, Marvel needs cash. They sell Spider-Man's film rights to Canon Films for $225,000. Here's the insane part. Canon executives never even read Spider-Man before. They thought they bought a horror character, like a man who turns into an actual spider. They hire this guy, Toby Hooper. You might know him, he directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to make the movie where Peter Parker becomes an 8-legged tarantula monster. I'm not making this up. Stan Lee reads the script and basically has a heart attack, and thankfully, Canon goes bankrupt before they can even make the Spider-Man tarantula horror movie. And of course it gets worse. The rights get split up. TV rights go to Viacom, home video to Columbia, film rights to Car Loco. James Cameron writes a Spider-Man script, but like most movies, that goes nowhere. And Marvel goes bankrupt. For 5 years, nobody can make a Spider-Man movie because nobody knows who owns Spider-Man. Now finally, Sony makes the most legendary trade in Hollywood history. They trade James Bond to MGM in exchange for Spider-Man. Here's the kicker though. Sony could have bought Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Panther, the entire Avengers roster for $25 million extra. But Sony's response was, nobody cares about those characters. Just give us Spider-Man. And that decision cost them almost $30 billion. They missed out on the entire MCU. So here's when Spider-Man explodes. It's 2022. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man becomes the first movie to make $100 million in the opening weekend. And Spider-Man was impactful not just because a superhero slinging on the screen. This was coming right after 9/11. This was the defining movie for New Yorkers to get like spirits back up, which I thought was pretty crazy. And the trilogy makes $2.5 billion. Now, even though Marvel sold the film rights, they kept the merchandise rights. So when Sony is making a few billion at the box office, Marvel is making tens of billions selling toys. Marvel watching Sony make billions with their characters is what inspired them to create the MCU. They thought if Sony could do it with one character, imagine what we could do with all of them. Now, as Marvel is making more money with the MCU, here's where it just kind of explodes just a little bit more. Spider-Man finally joins the MCU in 2016. It gave people hope that if Spider-Man could appear in this Captain America movie, that he can plant his stake in the MCU, and he did. In 2021, No Way Home makes $1.9 billion, uniting all three Spider-Man movies. I didn't mention the one about Andrew Garfield, even though I do love me some Andrew Garfield, but it wasn't that good, and it immediately got trashed anyways. I forgot something really important. 2018, I think, really revitalized Spider-Man. It really just took the world by storm once again with Into the Spider-Verse. Not only did it prove anyone could wear the mask, it proved a superhero movie could win an Oscar. So today, Spider-Man is worth $26 billion. But we have to talk about Steve Ditko. In 1999, after 33 years of silence, Stan Lee writes him a letter saying he considers him the co-creator. But Ditko rejects it. Why? Because one word: considers. Not is, not acknowledges, considers. And in 2018, Steve Ditko dies alone in his apartment and is found days later. The man who fundamentally created Spider-Man, who created the look billions of people recognize, died with less than $1 million to his name. Mourned by rarely anyone. And Stan dies 5 months later, mourned by millions, worth $50 million. So what's the secret to Spider-Man's success? I don't think it was a series of genius moves. It was really a comedy of errors that somehow worked. The real magic was the formula. Peter Parker only worked because he was us. That's why every single generation discovers Spider-Man and sees themselves in him. Now, yes, Stan and Steve created something perfect and everything fell apart around them. I think that's okay because that is the most Spider-Man story of all. Spider-Man was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the both of them. Hey, if you want to hang out some more, click that video right there. And my comic recommendation of the week is Absolute Martian Manhunter. Go read it. Okay, see you later. Goodbye now. Goodbye. I hope this was recording the whole time.